Prof. Namyong Lee's commentary, Long, A New Opportunity for Economic Development. Korea must actively participate in Greenland's resource development, including rare earths. If raw materials are cut off, technology also stops. Korea has world-class competitiveness in semiconductors, batteries, defense, and power equipment, yet that competitiveness stands on a single point of failure: the stable procurement of raw materials. Critical minerals such as rare earths, copper, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and lithium are not mere commodities. They are input variables that determine industrial utilization rates, and when the input is disrupted, process technology becomes powerless. The policy illusion is the belief that if prices rise, we can substitute. Price increases are a cost problem, but supply interruptions are a production problem, and when production stops, exports, employment, tax revenue, and inflation all shake at the same time. In particular, critical minerals typically require about a decade for new mines and refining facilities to reach commercial production, and in some cases more than 15 years. So once a shock occurs, it is difficult to restore stability with short-term measures. Recent international statistics already place the critical minerals market in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and some items show double-digit annual demand growth. In scenarios of energy transition and electrification, projections repeatedly indicate that around 2040, lithium demand could rise by dozens of times, while graphite, nickel, and cobalt demand could also increase by dozens of times. With a slope like this, the rational approach is not "we will buy it when we need it," but we must reduce the probability of disruption starting now. Rare earths are decided not at the mining stage, but at refining and magnets. Rare earths are often misunderstood as rare minerals because of their name, but the true lever that controls industry is not reserves. It is the choke point in the value chain. High barriers form in separation, refining, metallization, alloying, and magnet manufacturing, where technology, environmental regulation, and specialized facilities combine, and the side that controls these barriers controls not only prices but physical volumes. The fact that these choke points are concentrated in specific countries is the core supply chain risk. Across multiple industry sources, rare earth refining is often described as highly concentrated in the 80 to 90% range, and permanent magnets, especially NdFeB, are discussed as even more concentrated, around 90%. The key point is not the last decimal place, it is the structure. If one node delays approvals or changes export terms, automobiles, industrial motors, wind power, robotics, aerospace, and defense can be shaken simultaneously. Therefore, the goal of participating in Greenland should not be to secure a mine, but to diversify choke point processes. If Korea secures only mining equity, it can still become dependent again at the refining stage. Korea must participate as a package that connects refining, processing, materials, and magnets, and it must bring a contractual structure that secures a meaningful share of refining and intermediate products within allied supply chains. Greenland provides not short-term volumes, but a long-term option. Greenland is not a place where one can expect large-scale supply next year because of infrastructure constraints, climate, and strict environmental standards. Roads, ports, power, and workforce capacity are limited. Arctic construction seasons and logistics volatility can inflate costs, and the high thresholds of environmental compliance and social acceptance mean that permitting can account for half of the project. Even so, Greenland is strategically important because it offers an allied option. What Korea must secure now is not a few tons immediately, but a seat in an allied supply chain in the coming 10 to 20 years of raw material competition. Only with that seat do long-term offtake rights, the ability to reflect quality specifications, and doors to co-investment and co-financing open. There is another opportunity in industrial policy spillovers. Greenland is not merely a mine, it is also a market for high-difficulty infrastructure packages such as ports, power systems, polar logistics, environmental monitoring, remote operations, and safety systems. If Korea enters not as a raw material buyer, but as a partner that provides infrastructure, operations, safety, and digital capabilities, participation in resource development becomes a reference point for new export industries. Stakeholder dynamics are determined more by permitting power than by geology. The core stakeholders inside Greenland are the self-governing authorities and local communities. Local communities have no reason to support a project unless jobs, education, infrastructure, and revenue sharing are ensured. If they judge it to conflict with tourism, fisheries, or traditional ways of life, they can oppose it, and that opposition materializes not as mere opinion, but as permitting decisions and litigation. Denmark carries a dual task, defending sovereignty, security, and international reputation, while respecting Greenland's choices. The United States and Europe have strong economic security goals to reduce dependence on China and prefer allied value chain restructuring over simple mining. China calculates that the more it maintains concentration in refining and magnets, stages even more powerful than mining, the more it can influence rivals' manufacturing utilization rates through policy. Korean firms seek stable procurement and cost predictability, but if that interest alone is pushed forward, the project stops. Power in this game is not only money, it is also permits, and permits are a function of social acceptance, environmental standards, and institutional legitimacy. Korea must therefore enter with technology and capital, yet design relationships by fixing local benefits and compliance with norms into contracts first. Policy decisions should be calculated not by price, but by the expected loss from disruption probability. An expert approach is not emotion, but a model. If P is the probability of supply interruption, L is the domestic production loss during interruption, and C is the cost of substitution, line conversion, and logistics inflation, then the expected loss is PXLC. Even if raw materials are somewhat more expensive, lowering P reduces expected loss. Lowering expected loss reduces industrial volatility, and lower volatility sustains long-term investment and employment. This model must be operated by item. For items that are hard to substitute, such as rare earth magnets, even a small increase in P can sharply increase expected loss. So national level indicators such as strategic inventory days and the share of volumes fixed under long-term contracts must be managed. By contrast, for items like copper, where the market is large but supply constraints can become structural, a portfolio of long-term contracts, recycling, substitute materials, and efficiency improvements is needed. Europe is moving by institutionalizing this way of thinking. With 2030 as a reference point, benchmarks such as 10% domestic extraction, 40% domestic processing, and 25% domestic recycling for strategic raw materials are presented, and a direction is discussed to keep dependence on any single third country below 65% for specific materials. Korea must redesign its policies in the same language, and participation in Greenland becomes a means to turn that goal into reality. The participation model must bind offtake, equity, processing, and infrastructure into one contract. The solution for participating in Greenland is not mine investment, but contract design. First, demand-side firms must quantify the minerals, purity, monthly volumes, and allowable variability they require. Second, based on those numbers, Korea must sign long-term purchase agreements, offtake. Once offtake is secured, the project gains financing. Once financing attaches, infrastructure is built. Once infrastructure is built, local jobs and tax revenues grow, and political legitimacy rises. Third, equity investment is a means, not an end, and equity matters only when combined with offtake. The worst form, equity without volumes, must be avoided. Fourth, Korea must secure seats for diversified refining and processing. If Korea cannot design an arrangement where it carries part of refining or intermediate products domestically or within allied networks, Mining participation can instead reinforce choke point dependence. Fifth, infrastructure and operational capabilities must be connected to exports. Ports, power, remote operations, environmental monitoring, safety management, and polar logistics are areas where Korea can build strength. By proposing this package, Korea enters not with "give us raw materials," but with "let us grow together," which is the most practical way to earn trust from local communities and governments. Governance earns public trust only when there are stop criteria and disclosure. The typical pattern through which overseas resource development loses public trust is straightforward. Unclear objectives, no mechanism to control failure, repeated additional spending, and eventual socialization of losses. To break this pattern, control must come before support. Stage gate criteria must be explicit. At the exploration stage, decisions should be based on drilling data, grade, recovery rates, and environmental risks. At the permitting stage, if social acceptance, predicted environmental impact, or compensation structures fail to meet thresholds, the project must stop. At the development stage, if total costs and schedule risks for power, ports, and logistics exceed critical limits, the project must be downsized or exited. Emotional investing in the belief that if we pour in more money, it will recover must be prohibited. Disclosure is a technology of success. If costs, schedules, risks, compliance with local benefit sharing, and environmental monitoring indicators are disclosed continuously, political attacks are likely to diminish and financing costs may fall. Insurance and finance dislike uncertainty, and transparency is the strongest tool to reduce uncertainty. A 24-month execution roadmap and performance metrics must decide success early. The first 6 months should build a mineral-by-mineral risk scoring model, using inputs such as dependence on a single country, concentration of refining, lead time distributions, inventory days, substitutability, sensitivity to export controls, and the scale of domestic industrial losses. Korea must calculate expected losses by item. Once that is done, the top 5-7 items to lock in first become clear, and those items become the primary targets of Greenland participation. The next 6 to 12 months are for allied partnering and packaging contracts. With Greenland, Denmark, and European partners, Korea must bind local jobs, education, benefit sharing, infrastructure, environmental monitoring, offtake, and diversified refining and processing into one contractual chain. Korea must enter not as a mere investor, but as a supply chain architect, and must fix long-term purchase rights and specification influence as core outcomes. The 12 to 24-month window is for pilot demonstrations and reducing permitting uncertainty. If Korea demonstrates pilot-scale separation and refining, Arctic logistics operating plans, and safety and environmental monitoring systems first, permitting risk falls. As risk falls, financing costs fall. And as financing costs fall, project economics improve, enabling a virtuous cycle. 4 metrics are sufficient: the reduction rate of single country dependence by critical mineral, the share of volumes fixed under offtake, the degree of allied diversification in refining and processing, and the fulfillment rate of local jobs, education, and benefit sharing. When these metrics move in numbers, Greenland participation becomes not a slogan, but scientific national management. Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's commentary long.